Hustings, our only Hustings this year for Harrow West. We're very fortunate to have the Conservative and Labour Party candidates for Harrow West who will be speaking to us and facing the questions from you and from me in the next short period of time. Firstly, before we start, many of you are new, and it's worth just giving a brief overview of the community here. So we have a very interesting community here. We try on a regular basis. We try and bring speakers from a range of different backgrounds: academics, social activists, scholars, as well as people who are from Muslim and other faith backgrounds, to come and engage and inform our community about a range of different topics, whether it's politics, whether it's social affairs, whether it's human rights, or whether it's an issue related to Islam or some of the specific areas of concern for Muslim communities in particular, and for Shia communities here in Mahfil. You may be aware that we are building the Salaam Center, a huge new project just over here around the corner, and if anyone wants to see it, we can definitely arrange site visits to get you the opportunity to see it. The Salaam Center is a huge new ambitious project that we're trying to bring the community together in a brand new way, thinking about how Muslims can contribute to the wider society through different means, whether that is through sports, through engagement in community affairs, and being a community hub for the local area. There's going to be a sports hall, there's going to be a restaurant, there's going to be a conference hall, wedding facilities, classrooms for madrasa, as well as a range of different functions, including gyms and other sports facilities. This we hope to be a real center for the community going forward, and we're embarking on that journey right now. So thank you very much for coming today, and without further ado, I'd like to welcome the people who we're here to see and talk to. So Dr. Anwara Ali from the Conservative Party, who's the parliamentary candidate for the Conservative Party, and Gareth Thomas, who is the parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party. Let's welcome them with a round of applause, please. Press that when you want to speak. Just press that when you want to speak, yeah? So the way that we're going to do this today, and I haven't even told them, and I apologize in advance to both of them for that, we're going to give them a couple of minutes to introduce themselves and why they think they're going to be the right person to be the Member of Parliament for Harrow West and for this area, including this mosque and this community, after which we'll then give and in that period they'll also have the opportunity to talk about why they think that their party is the party that we should be voting for. So we'll give them 3 minutes each for that. After that, we'll start on a range of different topics. We'll start on, we'll go through different topics. I'll ask a couple of questions, we'll get some more questions from the audience, and then we'll go through different topics in that way. And we'll get as many of you to ask your questions and to be part of this session. We as a mosque, it's important to recognize that we are here in a non-partisan fashion, but that does not mean that we won't be challenging both candidates very, very much. That challenge is not a challenge based on any partisan position, but it will be quite vigorous, and hopefully we'll see that from the audience as well. Hopefully they are quaking in their boots. Without further ado, let's start with, on the right, Dr. Anwar Ali. Can you give 3 minutes, please, to introduce yourself and talk about why you think people should vote for you and for the Conservative Party? Just press this button. Yeah, now it'll work.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Thank you very much for coming here tonight and giving me an opportunity to address you. I'm Dr. Anwara. I was raised in London and I have worked in London all my life, my working life. I'm a GP by profession. I'm a former counsellor. I was the first doctor from my state school. In the 70s, children in East London were more famous for their underachievement rather than their achievements. So I broke the tradition, if you like. As a counsellor, I helped to win £5 million of Healthy Towns money to the London Borough that I currently live in, and established the first cycle routes and the green grids through the borough. As a GP, I helped to form one of the first GP federations in the United Kingdom and the only GP care group to make sure that we provided patient-centred care. And that allowed us to address the needs of the local community, which is like here. There's a lot of diabetes, COPD, asthma. And so we were able to work with the entire community, not just GPs, but the healthcare, as well as other community, such as community matrons, nurses, and third sector organization. So that's a little bit about who I am and what I've done both as a counsellor and as a doctor. Why Harrow West was a long time ago, some 20 odd years ago, I worked as a locum doctor at Northwick Park Hospital. And in that time, I had the opportunity to get to know people in Harrow West, and I have lots of family and friends who live in Harrow West. And I loved it. I love the multiculturalism, the buzz, the diversity. It's one of the most, if not the most diverse borough in England and Wales. And I like your green spaces. And I always thought, you know what, when the opportunity comes, I'd love to live and retire in a place like this. And so when the opportunity came to apply to become the Member of Parliament of Harrow West, I jumped at it. And subhanAllah, I was selected as your candidate. Why should you vote for my party? Okay. Well, I think I'm actually surprised that more Muslim people are not voting Conservative and are not involved with the Conservative Party, because it is like our Muslim community, we believe in business, we believe in religion, and we believe in making, believe in patriotism. And I hope that more people will join and become members of the Conservative Party. And I think I would encourage people to come forward, because I think it's really important to have our voices around the table to make sure policy from national to local reflects our needs, and that we are able to implement that in policy. So those are some of the reasons I think that we should be voting Conservative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas.
Assalamu alaikum. It's a real privilege to be back at this mosque to face a Newsnight style grilling from you and Miqdad. It's great to have the opportunity to be here. I hope at the end to hear a little bit more about progress in terms of building the Salaam Center. I don't know whether it's my contribution to the fundraising efforts, the short video message that I did that has slowed things down, and it's been a drag on the project. But when it does finally happen, it's going to be a great asset to this community. And that's particularly important, not just in a Harrow West context, but it's particularly important to me because I grew up in North Harrow, grew up in Priory Way, just up the road, and went to Pinner Park and Hatch End high schools. And my son uses a facility that this community is very closely involved in, very close to this particular mosque. So I have many reasons to be grateful to this community. I've played a role as your Member of Parliament in being able to help one or two of you down the years in a very direct way, but also to help this community by helping to secure the funding to rebuild Whitmore High School, to rebuild Vaughan, and to rebuild Marlborough School. We've helped to secure in the past extra police cells at Harrow Police Station, and to secure what was a record number of police in Harrow by 2009. What do I want going forward if I'm re-elected? Well, the biggest priority, I think, has got to be to secure fair funding for Northwick Park Hospital, which hasn't been able to meet its 4-hour A&E target in 5 years, August 2014. I've had 2 children. Well, I should say my partner's had 2 children, and I think I've been there to help as well in that time, which gives you some sense of the crisis in local NHS provision. Our clinical commissioning group is over £40 million in deficit. And our walk-in centres down at Alexandra Avenue and Belmont Health Centre have closed, and the one remaining one in this borough, the PIN, is set to close as well. But I also stand before you in terms of the national context, wanting to go back to the people in terms of a people's vote on whether or not we should leave the European Union. There is no deal, there is no Brexit deal that is better in economic terms for our country than the deal we have at the moment to stay in the European Union. And given that we know so much more about what Brexit will cost this country than we did in 2016. I think it's right to go back to the people, with a new deal that says this is what Brexit could look like, or we'll stay in the European Union. And let me be clear, I would campaign to remain.
Thank you very much. And before we continue going, I think it's important that we take a moment to send our condolences and remember those who passed away in who were killed in the London Bridge attacks that just took place. So let's take a couple of moments to remember the victims of the terror attack there. Okay. Thank you all very much. Also, we'd like to apologize. We weren't able to put the translation of Surah Yasin on the screen. There were some technical problems that we have now resolved. Before we start, let's ask both candidates an important question. Let's start this time with Mr. Thomas. What is your view of the leader of your party, Mr. Jeremy Corbyn?
Well, I've always liked Jeremy. We share a mutual failing in that we're both Arsenal supporters. And with our team in crisis at the moment, we have shared different ways to lift our spirits. I mean, the truth is that Jeremy has revived the membership of the Labour Party and has published a very bold and ambitious agenda going forward. Many of you will be aware that there is an ongoing issue in our party around anti-Semitism, that we are facing an ongoing challenge to tackle. But he is our candidate for Prime Minister, and I have always believed that any Labour leader will be better than any Conservative leader to be Prime Minister. And given the record of the current Conservative Prime Minister, that is doubly true today.
Just to follow up on that, so are you or are you not a strong supporter of Jeremy Corbyn?
I'm a member of the Labour Party and therefore a strong supporter of Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister rather than Boris Johnson, definitely.
And now to Dr. Anwara. Dr. Ali, are you a strong supporter of Boris Johnson?
Absolutely.
Yeah, keep it. I think that's on. No, when the light's off. That's on.
I'm a strong supporter of Boris Johnson. I think Boris Johnson has the qualities of leadership. He went to Europe and got us a deal which was passed by Parliament by 30 votes, which got rid of the backstop and which also respects the democratic vote that people took in 2016. Now, we may be on either side of that vote, but we have to respect democracy. Just because we don't like the result, you may be a Remainer, you may be a Brexiteer, but if we don't respect the fundamental values of democracy, what do we respect? Tomorrow, say I win the election and not Gareth, and I'm sure I'm going to win the election, is he going to come back and say, no, let's have another vote because I've been here longer than her? It is fundamentally who is a good leader, and Boris Johnson is the right leader for this country to take us forward and unleash the potential of the United Kingdom. There is so much potential out there, and at the moment, parliamentarians are playing games. What Jeremy Corbyn wants another referendum, and it will be another European referendum, another Scottish referendum. Our country can't go forward. What we want, what you and I and all of us want, is safer streets, better schools, more NHS resources, and we can't do anything. Gareth talks about the health service. Okay. You can't provide that if you can't go beyond Brexit.
Let's focus on Boris Johnson, and as we talked about Jeremy Corbyn. So, do you have any criticisms of Boris Johnson?
I have no particular criticism, but I think that I would be stupid if I didn't acknowledge that there are sentiments, there are things that have been said. But I think it's time that everybody on all sides of politics stopped the rhetoric and became much more honest and spoke truthfully and honestly. There is a problem in the Labour Party which is deep and entrenched, and they have failed to address that. Now, the Conservative Party are doing an inquiry, and I will be campaigning to make sure that inquiry happens and everything implemented. However, my personal experience as a Muslim in the Conservative Party has been a good one, and I haven't seen anything. And if I would not condone any kind of anti-anything.
We're talking about Boris Johnson here. Are there any other questions specifically on the leadership? And one of the things that is obviously very important when you're voting for a party is the integrity and the importance of the leadership of that party. So what we'd like to do is get people from the audience. We'll get 3 at a time, if that's okay, just to make sure. We'll get one from the back there, one here, and one there, and then we'll come back. So firstly, from the back there, Mrs. There's no mic. If you can just stand up and ask your question.
Gareth, I fail to comprehend how you can stand there and say you have no issues with Boris Johnson. He has referred to women who wear hijab as letterboxes. He has called single parents with illegitimate children inappropriate. Used language that is so despicable that I can't even bring myself to use the words. He has referred to young people wanting money and having desires to be like Nigerian in terms of their desire to make money, implying that they're corrupt. I cannot understand how you can stand there as a woman and not know that this man, when he opens his mouth, all that comes out is lies. And to reflect his issues, he doesn't come to interviews, and he starts his anti-Semitic rhetoric about Jeremy Corbyn. So I want to know why you are standing here asking me to vote for a lie. Because for me, a fundamental value is truth. I'm sorry.
Good 3 questions for us. Yeah.
We need honesty. Really, at the moment, I am so disillusioned. After having lived here for 41 years, I fear for the safety of my life, not mine, but my grandchildren and my children. I'll be dead in 20 years. But my children and my grandchildren have a future in this country. And I don't want the kind of rhetoric and the language that is espoused by leaders that legitimize racism.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't know how you can stand there and
Thank
as a
you.
woman of color.
Thank you very much. Let's get 3 questions and we'll come back.
Now, is it a question you want or comment?
Questions. Only questions, please.
The thing is, I find it very difficult, really and truly. I mean, I always thought it's healthy to have an opposition party anytime when there's a government. It's healthy because it gives the other person on their toes. However, this particular leader, Corbyn, is really something else because, and of course, Mr. McDonald, it's more Marxist policies coming out, not Labour policies. Labour, socialist, normal, well-balanced policies can come out. But this guy is something else. He wants to nationalise everything. He wants to take over everything. He wants to, I mean, just like on this side, you're saying that we've got anti-Semitism going on in Labour and there's Islamophobia that accused the Tory party was being investigated. We've got huge evidence about, I mean, Corbyn has actually been with the IRA, he favours the Hamas, he favours Hezbollah and all the rest of it. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not doing the Muslim community any good. Apart from
Have you got a question? Have you got a question for me?
Yes, I have got a question. How can you have a leader who not only he says he's for everybody, but he obviously is not, and so also the figures he's throwing up economically, how on earth are we going to get that?
We'll come to economics later. Just we'll focus on leadership. Yes, candidate.
Question for both of you. We've seen Mr. Thomas over here for many years. And obviously Dr. Ali, my question is that no matter who it is, whichever leader that we choose, if they start off lying by calling names to other people, they are Islamophobic from the top to the bottom. And this is then covered up by saying there is an inquiry taking place, which is probably started about 10 years ago, still not finished. It probably never will finish. It will continue as it is now. So, how do you expect, Dr. Ali, that we should be trusting an organization which is for a long time been anti-Islamic and anti-Muslim? Secondly,
Can we keep it to one question? Is that okay? We'll come back to other questions later. Is that okay?
okay, and then question for Mr. Thomas as well. promises for the hospitals, NHS, this, that, and the other, how likely are we that we see that those promises are going to be kept if Mr. Corbyn does come into power?
So lots of questions on integrity. So we'll start with Dr. Ali.
Okay. So I acknowledge the anger in the room. As I said, I'm not stupid not to acknowledge that. And I reiterate what I said. I think politicians and everybody in the public sphere have to stop the rhetoric. We have to go back to honest politics and build trust in our parliament and our parliamentarians. Like you, sister, in the back, majority of my family do wear hijab, and they had issues with that. But also, I think we need to go beyond the article. In that article, Boris Johnson was defending the right for women to wear whatever they want. Those were clumsy choice of words. That is a fact, brother. That's a fact. And that's why I can stand here, because I stand on the values of hard work, of family and religion, and and making sure that we have a strong economy. The last time Labour were in power, they left the country bankrupt. If the country is bankrupt, we can't prosper in this country.
Okay, so wait one second, please. We'll try and we'll get questions from everyone. Just on one of the questions that keep on being asked is about lying. Do you think that Boris Johnson has lied at all during this campaign?
I haven't come across any lies.
Okay, and Gareth, your opportunity to answer the questions that have been raised so far.
Well, let me be clear. We have, firstly, let me pick up the point at the back, where whenever there is an incidence of racism or misbehaviour, you have to have robust processes in your party to tackle that. And whilst we have taken action on a series of cases that have been brought to our attention, it is clear that we will need to do more going forward to rebuild trust with the Jewish community in the UK, and I would be the first to acknowledge that. There is a recognition across, I believe, the whole of the Labour Party about that. What there doesn't seem to be in the Conservative Party is a recognition of the scale of the challenge they face in terms of Islamophobia. The inquiry that Sajid Javid wrung out of Boris Johnson on this issue hasn't started. It could have started. And now we hear it's been downgraded into a general inquiry on racism with no terms of reference published, etc. On the question about promises and whether you can trust any politician on promises. I mean, one of the things that I have noticed, and I hope it's not just related to the length of time I've been a Member of Parliament, is the decline in trust in those in senior positions in our country, and that is something that we should be wary of and be concerned about. But I think scepticism about what politicians say is something we should encourage. But cynicism is something we should be very wary about. And what I would say is we do need to get back to having lessons in schools about how politics works, to encourage our children to recognise the best of what politics can achieve for people, but recognise and understand how they can engage and challenge politicians and hold us to account.
Okay, do you think that Jeremy Corbyn has lied or during this campaign?
I don't believe he's lied during this campaign. What I would say is I think there was an opportunity to apologise to the Jewish community. It's an opportunity that many of us have taken, and I think it would have been helpful if he had done so as part of the process of rebuilding trust. But I don't believe he has lied during this campaign. I think he's been as straightforward as he can be. We've not tried to hide the cost of our spending plans or the ambition of the change we want for our country. We have published a fully costed manifesto which sets out the changes we would bring in for those who are relatively well off, and by comparison that's something that the Conservative Party has not done so. So we have been much more open than our opponents.
Okay, should we just go on there are still a couple of questions on this type of topic. We'll come back on. We've got a lot of questions coming up. Let's move on to the economy. We'll come back around to these types of questions as we go along. So on the economy is one of the most important questions. We'll be asking lots of questions on these types of topics. We only have a certain amount of time. I want to get everyone in, and we're going to go cover a lot of different topics. So the economy is an important part of the society as a whole. The economy drives a lot of jobs. Are a key part of how any country is able to grow. We are in a situation where there are radically different views between the two parties. Let's start with Mr. Thomas this time. Are you a fan of the ambitious policy of the Labour Party when it comes to the economy?
Yes, I am. Although I'm both a Labour politician and a Co-op Party politician. And so the Co-op Party has a slightly different perspective on some of the solutions to the problems that Jeremy Corbyn has rightly identified. But what I would say, above all else, the biggest economic change that our country will see is as a result of Brexit. And it is a change that will leave our country dramatically worse off. And that's why I am adamant that we should go back to the people with a soft Brexit as one option. But I would campaign for Remain in that referendum that I think is essential. Otherwise, we face a £70 billion hit to our economy over the next 10 years as a result of Boris Johnson's Brexit deal, plus numerous new waves of red tape for British business wanting to compete in European markets. By any stretch of the imagination, that is the single biggest, most catastrophic change to our economy that I can imagine.
So do you think the massive increase of spending up to £86 billion a year and the increase in taxation that is going to affect a large number of corporations and companies across this country is the right policy for this country?
I don't accept your description of it. Actually, if you look at what that would bring us back to in terms of levels of spending of European competitors, of European allies and other countries in the G7, we would actually be asking business to pay less corporation tax than many other countries in the G7, and the size of the state in the UK would still be less than most of the big countries of Europe, like Germany and France. So, whilst it's radical in the context of what Britain needs. It's not particularly radical in the context of what many other European and G7 countries are already see within their countries.
And you're a supporter of that approach?
Where I would have a quibble, I suppose, is over our plans for public ownership. I think it's right we should want to bring back into public ownership things like Thames Water, which has basically been stripped bare by an Australian bank, Macquarie, that used to own Thames Water. Water bills have rocketed since privatisation, and the people who've done very well have been those who've owned the company. Instead of it being run by the state, I'd like it to be run by employees and customers, so that each of you would have a vote, a bit like with John Lewis or with the Co-op group, in who sits on the board of the business. So that's my one quibble with the Labour Party, and that would be a conversation the two parties would have to have in government.
Dr. Ali, obviously the economy is very important, and many people will be talking about the real challenges of austerity over the last decade with the Conservative Party in power. What is your thoughts on the economic policies of the Conservative
Since
Party?
we've been in power from 2010 in coalition and then on our own, the economy has grown by 19%. There's no quibble about that. When Labour left power in 2010, the country was bankrupt, and there was a note left by the Labour Minister Liam Byrne to say there's no money left. So in Urdu they say namak mein, katta mein namak dala. Okay, so there was a bit of salt thrown into it. That's the audacity of Labour politician. When you look at the opportunities, so I want to go back and unpick some of the things that both Gareth is saying here tonight, and was also putting out in his leaflets. When Labour were in power in 2005, Gareth promised that he was going to, there would be a new hospital at Northwick Park. Well, that was when his party were in power. That wasn't delivered. And then he's had another 10 years under a Conservative government.
We do economy, yeah, and then we'll come to
I'm
health.
coming back to that because I don't want to forget that, because there's a lot of lies that are being put out here, and we're talking about integrity. So we should have integrity about things that we promised in the past. So that hasn't been delivered, and also the Conservatives had to foot a bill. We were left 60 billion to pick up for the PFIs as well. Secondly,
Are you
if
against PFIs then? Are you a supporter of PFIs or
I
against
don't
them?
support PFIs. I think that should be, PFIs were very expensive to deliver. I think it should be by government, and government can borrow at a much cheaper rate than organizations and private sector.
So
public
PFIs,
sector.
some people have been asking,
Yeah.
PFIs are public
Yeah.
finance initiatives. They are a
Yeah.
way of, a means of trying to fund different public initiatives, and this is done through a public-private partnership, and that's what happened under the previous Labour government during that time. It's one approach. Sorry, Boris.
Secondly, I just want to, because this is important, I don't understand that everybody's angry about national politics, but you're going to choose a member of parliament for Harrow West. Gareth has been here 22 years, okay? And what you need to look at is what has his delivery been. Now, he talked about the walk-in centre. The walk-in centres haven't closed. They've become appointment only. That is not due to a national government. That's local clinical commissioning bodies. And on those clinical bodies are the GPs who work in the area and health professionals, as well as people from the locality, as well as a member of the Labour Council. They're there. What they look at is the evidence. How do people actually use walk-in centres? What kind of appointments do they want? And what people, mostly what those surveys have shown across the country, not just in Harrow West, is people want quality time with their GP who knows what their problems are, and they want appointments only. What they don't want is people outside of boroughs, tourists and other people who have no right to be using those services, using those services.
Moving back to the economy.
Going back to the economy, I think that with economy growing, we've had the lowest unemployment since the 70s. We've had 1.8 million more women who have gone into work. And what we all want, I know regardless of colour, race, and ethnicity, we want the respect of a pay packet at the end of the day. What we don't want to be is stuck on benefits. And so what we want is the government and business to create jobs. For Muslim families, lots of us have small and medium-sized businesses. Well, we will be saving for those businesses. Under Corbyn, 10% of that business will be given straight away. If you have more than one property where you've been saving for your pension and you've managed to work all your life, your second property, you will have to give right of ownership, but you're not the state. You can't afford that. That is what a real Corbyn government is about.
Thank you very much. Let's get some views from the audience. We'll get different people. We'll come back afterwards as well. So let's just, yes, on the lady in the headscarf.
Muslim communities are one of the most economically disadvantaged in the country. What economic policies do each of your parties have to change that for us and our children?
Any other questions on the economy? Yes, Akhil?
A couple of years ago, there was a report saying that the UK productivity was the lowest in Europe. And then Corbyn comes up and says, and this is for Gareth, that we're going to have a 4-day week. How are we going to be able to manage that we can't manage in 5 days, in 4 days?
Okay.
So the productivity is where your income comes from and your increase in salary comes from. If you're not going to make it, how are you going to do it in 4 days?
Any other questions on the economy? There was that person in the back, yeah. So your question is, sorry? That's fine, that's not a question though. That's fair, but that's not a question. No question? Okay. Let's any thoughts from either candidate? Sorry, yeah. Mr. Thomas.
Okay, there's quite a few different points there. Let me start, ma'am, with the question that you asked about what can we do to raise up the level of earnings of the Muslim community and more generally. So, what I would say on that is, as the question was alluded to, what we want to do is to raise the floor. So that the minimum that everybody earns across the country is a real living wage of £10 an hour, and that would be a start. What we want to do is to give people better employment rights, so the chance through membership of a trade union to negotiate a better deal. And what we've also been very clear about is that the cost of Brexit, ma'am, is set to actually weaken the economy and potentially put at risk, as the gentleman said at the back, coming onto your statement, sir, one of the biggest ways in which we can damage our economy is to go ahead with Brexit, which is why I've been clear we should stay in the European Union, or at the very least offer to the British people a softer Brexit deal than Boris Johnson has delivered at the moment. The £70 billion hit to the British economy, which his deal represents, is not a figure that the Labour Party has invented. It's a figure that's come up from independent forecasters. So the biggest single thing about this general election is never mind nationalisation if you don't like that, never mind putting up people's wages. If you're a conservative, you're a businessman, the last thing you should be thinking about is voting for a Conservative Party committed to Brexit. On flats in Harrow, ma'am, and what I would say to you on that is this. The reason that we are seeing more flats being built is partly because the current Conservative government has reduced the powers available to planning authorities in local councils, making it easier for developers to build and to build high. And at the same time, by cutting virtually all of the government funding to local authorities, Harrow has lost over 97% of its direct funding grant from government. It is forcing councils to work with developers to allow them to build big flats in order to try and get the council tax income to maintain even a very basic level of service going forward. So actually, if you want to take action on that, then actually you need to vote Labour so that we can give planning authorities back a little more power.
And the
4-day week? Well, every time we have reduced the maximum working limit in this country, someone has always said we can't afford it. And it's gone down from 80 hours, now down to 40 hours. What we have said is this is a long-term ambition. We will hope to achieve this over the course of the next decade. And we'll set up a commission to help us work with business and other organisations to achieve that. But if you think about it, actually, there are many people already opting for flexible working, opting to work a 4-day week, talking to their business, their business about how they go about that. So it is something that is happening already. It is a trend that is underway, and what we are seeking to do is to extend that over time and in a managed and gradual way, so that it doesn't have a big hit on the economy as it would do if you just introduced it overnight. We want to extend that option ultimately for everybody in the country, but it is at this stage an aspiration that we would hope to achieve over the next 10 years.
Dr. Ali.
Okay, so the sister's question, how do we increase employment in Muslim community? First of all, it has to be a level playing field for all communities. So Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Jews should not be segregated and should not shouldn't have a difficulty to tap into the jobs market. What would I do personally? Well, you've had Gareth Thomas for 22 years. He hasn't held one jobs fair. The first thing I will do, I will bring employers from across the country and across the world to Harrow West to make sure that everybody, Muslims and all the residents in this borough, can tap into that. Secondly, what does Brexit give us the opportunity? We all have origins elsewhere. Some of us come from British Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, Iranians, Jordanians. What Brexit will allow us to do is what my party is proposing is an Australian-style points-based system. So everybody who has the right skills and qualification for the jobs that we have, they can come here, and that will allow it to become a more level playing field, which has not been, which Labour introduced, where anybody from Europe could come here with no skills or qualification, but outside of Europe, so somebody from Pakistan, for Iran, couldn't come here. They had to meet very high targets in order to come here, both in terms of what qualifications and skills they had, and the amount of money they would have to spend. They'd have to show £18,000. They couldn't even join their spouses here. That's his government that left that behind here. Going back to a 4-day week, that is going to affect the working class people, the very people that Labour purport to serve. There is no large major economy that has a 4-day working week. Okay, that's a fact of life. Whether we like it or not, we can't be a major economy if we're not working. We have to be productive. Okay, it's going to. Think about the hospitals. The very hospitals and nursing service, all of the public service depend on people to work not just 5 days, 7 days a week. What we want to do is have good work conditions so that people can work and flexible hours. So. Women, whether they're from Muslim backgrounds or other backgrounds, women, we have children, we have to have time out so that we can work, whether it's from home. A lot of work can be done from home nowadays. So we want to make sure that employers are open to that, and that's what I would be fighting for. Going back to the brother's question there, the fact of the matter is Labour's plan will, Corbyn's plan will cost this country £1.2 trillion. The IFS, the Institute of Fiscal Institute, has said that it's a cuckoo-boo-boo plan. You can't go backwards. Whenever have you done? I come from a business background. You have to go forward. Things may be tough, but let's go forward. We've already got a deal with South Korea. We have deals in the pipeline with Canada, with Australia, and that's what we need to do: is take our economy forward, not take it backward and gridlock it for another 2 years, so that parliamentarians can sit there and instead of listening to the will of the people and addressing those major issues. People on the doorstep tell me that crime has been rising here in Harrow West. We need to address those things. We need to address the crime. We need to address the schools and the health services, not go backwards and be in a gridlock.
Repeat.
You haven't answered my question. I said that when Labour came in with a debt of 700 billion, you were supposed to reduce the deficit. You promised to do that in 3 years. Actually, the debt is now nearly 2 trillion. Okay, so your economic plan is failed. You've actually run this country down to austerity. Not spending money is not a big clarity. You're going to reduce the deficit doing that. So I'm trying to ask you, why did you get such a big debt? Why is it taking so long?
Well, my party didn't create the debt. It's the Labour Party that created the debt, and we have brought the deficit down, and we have
Deficit's
created
gone
more
up.
jobs, more prosperity, and reduced the unemployment. Our economy is growing at 19%.
But most European countries reduced it in 3 years. Your economic plan is failed. People have suffered. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. The BMS said that. So that we have paid an expensive price for a failed project. So you need to answer why was such a bad economic plan. It was a terrible economic plan.
Our economic plan took us out of bankruptcy, brother.
Excuse me, we are more.
So, and your figures, I haven't cross-checked your figures. The figures are, the economy has grown by 19%. Unemployment is at its lowest. Do you disagree with those figures?
Sorry, wait. What? Wait.
Homeless, food bank. Food bank. I mean, what are you talking about? You need to land, man.
No, I'm not living in cuckoo land.
Okay. Wait. Sorry. Just what? We'll raise. We'll ask. We'll get to you in a second. We will get an opportunity. We will give the opportunity to speak. Dr. Ali, you mentioned 1.2 trillion pounds as the cost of the Corbyn plan. What's that based on? Because I think my understanding was that Fact Check looked at it and they said that was a not correct estimation. I was just wondering where you got that from.
That's all the renationalisation will add. The taxpayers will have to pay for that renationalisation.
Fact check the one and BBC Reality Check both looked at that figure and thought that figure was not correct because it wasn't something that was based on. It was based on plans which weren't part of the manifesto. So just wondering where you got that from, because the BBC Reality Check and Channel 4's Fact Check said that was not correct.
Well, I haven't read that information because the
Okay,
fact
that's fine.
checks.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to understand where you got it from. Mr. Thomas, you wanted to respond.
Well, I was just going to, I'm just lost almost to know where to start first. I mean, I just think about the number of people who are having to work 3 jobs just to make ends meet. The number of people who are using food banks has rocketed, and actually most of the people who are using the food bank in Harrow are actually in a job, but the job is simply not paying enough. And then we're led to believe that Brexit's somehow going to be a great leap forward for the country's economy, when every independent and even the government's own forecasters say it will represent a big hit to our economy. It's not the Labour Party that's living in cuckoo land, I'm afraid. It is the Conservative Party not being anything like ambitious enough for all the people of our country. Sure, they're ambitious for the very rich and for those who can look after themselves, but they're not ambitious for everybody else in our country. If they were, we might have seen Conservative MPs and senior ministers going to food banks and trying to sit down and understand the consequence of people living on the breadline in the way that we're seeing at the moment.
I think there have been a lot of people who are really interested, who've been raising questions on this type of question. Someone who mentioned something on food banks and homes. Yes, let's start with the gentleman.
Are there any plan in the Conservative Party for NHS to take over by President Trump?
I'll give you the chance. I'll give you the chance to respond. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Yeah.
Same question. Can we trust that Boris Johnson on the NHS and that's 5 years of trying to sell this?
Okay. On the anything else? There are a couple of people who are asking about. No. Okay. No. No, sorry. There were some people who were asking about poverty and homelessness. So I was just wondering. They were shouting out. I just wanted to hear properly rather than anyone shouting out. No. Okay. Dr. Ali, it's on you. Both of you. For you.
Under a Conservative government, we've created a record number of jobs, and that is the way to reduce. Okay, so NHS. NHS will never be on sale. It has never been on sale. In successive elections, Labour Party always sends the same message and says, does scaremongering saying the NHS is for sale. Their NHS will never be for sale.
This was raised by President Trump and said this up when he came to UK's visit.
Can you trust the Tories on the NHS? Well, you can't even trust Boris Johnson to be willing to step in and save Mount Vernon Cancer Centre from closing, and that serves his own constituents as well as ours. In July, an independent report was published saying the hospital has become so dilapidated over the last 10 years and so short-staffed, it is going to have to be closed on its current site. Why is Northwick Park Hospital unable to achieve that 4-hour target? It's not because our doctors and nurses aren't working hard enough. They are doing a remarkable job in very difficult circumstances. It's because there aren't enough doctors and nurses and there aren't enough critical care beds. And there simply isn't enough investment going into the National Health Service. And why, if there is nothing in the idea of Boris Johnson opening up the NHS to the Americans, why have there been a series of negotiations taking place with the Americans at which the NHS has been put on the table by those American negotiators in each of those conversations and still hasn't been taken off the table? We just simply cannot trust Boris. He lied to the DUP by saying there wouldn't be a border in Northern Ireland as a result of Brexit, and now there's going to be a border down the Irish Sea as a result. Completely changed his mind. So I suspect what we'd see is we'll always see great promises from the Conservatives on the NHS, but they never actually deliver in government.
Thank you, Sabah, and then we'll come. Yeah.
And hang on a second, and the walk-in services. I mean, Anwara, you're just wrong. I mean, the walk-in services at Alexandra and Avenue and Belmont have closed. You cannot, if tomorrow, walk down to Alex or drive down to Alex and have your child seen by a nurse or a doctor and without an appointment. And speak to any GP or anybody in the who works in healthcare, and you'll understand the pressure that Harrow's primary care services are under.
Thank you.
It's a pity Central Middlesex A&E department closed under the Conservatives, because that's another thing
she'll respond.
that's caused the problems we've got
okay,
here.
Sabah, and then you'll. Thank you, Sabah.
The Conservative Party are working very, very hard to drive this country into recession. The only investment, the foreign investment from this country are running away because of the way that this government has conducted their approach on Brexit, including this current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, in his campaign was saying that we're spending that much money, I can't remember the figure, towards Europe for the NHS. He has misled the nation. Why doesn't he have the courtesy to go back to the nation and say, these are the facts as we know it now?
Thank you. No, Dr. Ali.
Okay, so going back to the NHS, as I say, categorically, both Boris and Matthew Hancock have said the NHS is not for sale, it is Labour's scaremongering. Secondly, Conservatives have already promised £33.9 billion for the NHS. Under the, of the 70 years of the NHS, 40 years, the Conservative Party have been the custodians of the NHS. That's fact, okay? I'm not here to spread rhetoric. When he says ask a GP, I am a GP. I've served 22 years in the National Health Service. And I also saw with my own eyes the largest amount of privatization of the NHS happened under Tony Blair, who gave he just gave blank checks to private organizations. So when he says that, I'm sorry, I do take offense at that. I'm talking about.
So you're supportive? Okay. You're against privatization or for it? Sorry, I just want.
I'm not for privatization of the National Health Service. I think that the National Health Service should be in the public domain. Now, can I go back into the 33.9 billion, out of which 8.6 billion will be given upfront this year? That will ensure that we get 50,000 more nurses. Now, can I clear that? Because there's been a lot of talk about that. 50,000, out of which 30,000 will be new nurses who will be trained, both here and be recruited from overseas, where they have the right qualifications. And then 20,000 will be to help women or nurses who have have children or taken a career break to come back, and they'll be also given a bursary. NHS staff, nurses, midwife, cleaners will be given a 6.2% pay rise. GPs doctors who haven't had a pay rise will be also given a 2.4% pay rise. Those are the actual figures. And when in 2010, Cameron promised that the NHS funding will be ring-fenced, and it has been ring-fenced. But we also, today is about honesty. A lot of the things that are about honesty. We as a nation have to realize that our NHS, in order for it to continue providing good quality services, we need to look at the funding honestly. And I say that both my party and the Labour Party and all parties need to look at that. Because of the advances in medicine, we are all living longer. We're not paying enough tax to have that NHS service. And so what we need to have is a cross-party, which is something I've been campaigning for, a cross-party commission to look at how can we fund our NHS without making it a political football at every election time, and so that we can all get the services that we need as we grow older and our children can inherit an NHS. And that means honesty from everybody. When it comes to Northwick Park, Gareth, you need to ask yourself that question. When you were in power, you should have delivered a new hospital at Northwick Park. And now you're saying, why hasn't that happened? It's happened under your watch. What have you done? How have you represented the Harrow West people in Westminster to bring those resources? And same with Mount Vernon. I can tell you what I would have done. In my borough, they weren't able to privatize GP practices because I led that campaign. I made sure we went there and fought and got that 5 million Healthy Towns money because children were getting obese. We needed to get that green grid. I went and made sure that I lobbied using my own personal skills and getting a campaign going to get 14 million. That is how I will represent you. I'm not saying that my party's got everything right, but I know what I will do for you is I will be your voice in Westminster, and a strong voice. So what I'm asking you today is give me a chance to serve you. And if you don't like it, in 5 years, kick me out. But don't keep somebody there who's making, on the local level, I'm asking you, please look at it with an open mind and see, look at my qualifications and my skills and look at Gareth's. Don't base all your opinions on national.
So, Anwara, we're talking about honesty. I mean, and let's just clear up. Do you support the closure of the walk-in services at Alexandra Avenue and Belmont Health Centre?
What I support is good quality appointments for local residents that should be used by local residents.
So that's a yes.
And if that is what residents and surveys, clinical clinician community groups made that decision. If it's based on evidence, then we should respond and react to that evidence and implement the policies and not use rhetoric. Should it be appointment only or should it be walk-in? Who are the service users? Look at the actual evidence. What everybody wants, and I see patients, 50 patients a day, and they tell me what we want is a good quality appointment with our GP. We don't want 10 minutes appointment, we want longer when we have more than one problem. If we have a chronic illness, we don't want the GP to send us out after 10 minutes. We want to be able to sit with them and have a proper consultation and a proper examination. So let's get away from that rhetoric and have a little bit of honesty. Okay. This is a clinical commissioning group decision made locally by your clinical commissioning group.
Okay, thank you very much. We've had a lot of questions on the economy and some on the healthcare. Let's move on to a different area, which is the area which Muslim communities appear to be most concerned about, according to the largest surveys done on this, which is to do with Islamophobia in particular. Islamophobia, as everyone's aware, is a big problem and an issue for many Muslim communities. A third of young children in this country think that Muslims are taking over England. These types of attitudes are obviously really problematic. So starting with Mr. Thomas, as Dr. Ali just spoke, what do you think we should be doing to tackle Islamophobia in every part of society?
Well, I think we have to call it out when we see it, and we have to encourage every child through the curriculum to visit a mosque and to take away some of the fear that is being spread in the UK by all sorts of organisations about what Islam represents and what you'll find in a mosque. I mean, I laugh because it is a very serious subject, but I mean, some of the things that are being said about the Muslim community are completely and utterly ridiculous. And I think the Muslim Council of Great Britain deserves great credit for the Visit Your Mosque Day, which is a very skillful way, I think, of the community being seen to be open and receptive. And then some of the initiatives that this particular community have taken to engage very directly with communities of other faiths, I think are sort of country-leading initiatives, which the Muslim Council of Britain could usefully replicate or encourage other mosques and communities to replicate around the UK. I think we also need our media regulators to be tougher on Islamophobic comments in the media, and both BBC and in particular papers like the Mail and the Telegraph. We've seen plenty, I'm afraid, of examples, the Spectator, plenty of examples of Islamophobic comments being made. But you can also use your vote in a very direct way and vote against a Prime Minister who's made Islamophobic comments, a leader who's done so. You yourselves have thrown back in this evening already some of the Islamophobic comments that Boris Johnson has made. And I think if the Muslim community would exercise its democratic vote and to vote against someone who'd made those comments, it would send a very powerful signal to leaders in the future.
And when it comes to what would you do to tackle the rise of the far right, which obviously is part of that as well? I'll come to you.
I think you have to tackle the rise of the far right in a series of ways, where they are posing a very direct threat to life, and increasingly now our security services are saying that the biggest threat that Britain faces in terms of a terrorist threat is from the rise of the far right. So we have to make sure our security services are properly resourced. We have to try and get into communities where there are deep divisions in those communities and try and break down barriers very directly. And I think we have to make it a national mission to reduce those divisions and those barriers, and to try and understand some of the causes in particular communities, which are often related to poverty and lack of opportunities that are driving some of those young people to think that they should join up with far right causes.
Dr. Ali, obviously one of the questions that has been asked and that you'll be well aware of is the challenge of Islamophobia, specifically in the Conservative Party. It's something that has been raised by many Muslim communities. You'll obviously be aware of the fact that Boris Johnson chose someone like Chloe Westley, who who calls far-right bigots and Islamophobic bigots a hero into his team, and has chosen other people like Zach Goldsmith, who ran the campaign for Mayor of London, to be in his team. Like, do you see these actions as a problem in the Conservative Party, or what do you think about that, and how do you think we should the party should deal with the issue of Islamophobia?
I think so. First thing is that we should have zero tolerance to Islamophobia or any kind of racism. Okay, it's not correct to sit here, and Gareth has just advocated that the Conservative Party should address Islamophobia when his party has categorically failed to address anti-Semitism. Okay, okay. So yeah, I'm coming to that, sister. Yeah, yeah. We also need to, the word Islamophobia is thrown around, and it's really important that we define what Islamophobia is. Okay. Firstly, in the Labour Party, we've seen, stalwart Labour MPs who are good MPs. Every party has, MPs who have contributed to the public sphere in this country. People like Hilary Armstrong, who was a deputy whip, who was voted out by our association. There has been a hounding of members of parliament, and it's not acceptable. So I think what we have to do is zero tolerance. We have to have education from the grassroots, from schools right to the top, and there should be no we should not condone any type of racism or anti-Semitism or Islamophobia in public life.
Do you think that the Conservative Party has currently had a zero tolerance policy on Islamophobia so far?
I think we can all do a lot more, and I think that's what I will be campaigning. As a British Muslim, I will be campaigning to make sure that we address any Islamophobia. Anybody who has, been Islamophobic has been, has lost their party membership, and there has been strict action taken. But I think the word, where certain words are being thrown around, you need to define what Islamophobia is. I don't know of anybody in the Conservative Party, a councillor or a member of parliament who has lost their seat or their place due to Islamophobia, where associations have to kick them out. But I can choose several instances of that happening in the Labour Party. And also, the other thing is, as member of the parliament, I'm not going to be just working with the Muslim community or the Hindu community or the Christian community. I'm here for everybody. I'm not going to ask, you should vote for me because I'm a Muslim. You should vote for me because you feel that I have the right skills and qualification, and that's what it should be based on, not just my identity and my religion. It should not be based on religious identity. We need to get away from that and look at, if you applied for a job as a teacher or a doctor, nobody will be looking at what religious belief you have, or there are people who don't follow any religious order. You will be looking at, does this person have the skills and qualification to be a teacher, to be a magistrate, to be a member of parliament? Why are we making this a religious issue and a race issue? We are making those divisions, and the Labour Party has been leading that game. I'm not saying my party, doesn't have issues to address. What I'm saying is we need to go away from that, and that responsibility is a responsibility of both the public as well as politicians. It's not a one-way street. We all need to get away from that.
Okay, and on Islamophobia, just continuing on this, because obviously an important topic. You said that you're not aware of many cases. I think that there are hundreds of cases of Islamophobia from different councillors.
Well, can you tell me which they are? What they are? Because I will look at it.
Okay, I'll give.
Because I think there's a lot of terms being here. That's a lot of being throwing around. I can show you cases of members of parliament whose names I've just said, who have been thrown out of the Labour Party because of anti-Semitism. I haven't seen. You tell me which member of parliament has lost their seat because they're a Muslim. You show me which one.
I'm not. I'm asking. Wait. Sorry. I'll give everyone a chance. I'll give a chance to everyone. Just 1 second. I'll give a chance. You ask. I'm asking questions, not necessarily people there to answer the questions, but so please. What we'll do. I'm asking questions on this. Please. I'm not here to answer questions. I'm here to ask questions. I want to ask questions of issue of concern for Muslim communities, and that's what I'm going to be doing here. Okay. Let's get some questions from the audience, and then we'll come back around. Yes, over there.
So you mentioned the definition of Islamophobia several times. The Muslims wrote the definition of Islamophobia and it was put forward to the Conservative Party by the MCB. However, the MCB rejected that definition.
The MCB rejected it.
The Conservatives rejected that definition. Do you not believe that Muslims have a right right to define Islamophobia themselves?
I absolutely believe that Muslims have a right to define Islamophobia. But a lot of the time, what's happening here in the media and out there in the public sphere, we're using the term loosely, and that then actually reduces the gravity of what Islamophobia is. So I think what we need to do, where there is incidents of
Can you go? Wait. Can you give an example of something where the Islamophobia term has been used when it shouldn't have been used, and therefore it decreases the gravity of the term? Can you give an example of that?
I can't think of one straight away, but I have come across instances when it's been said as Islamophobia when actually it's just somebody making a point.
Any example?
In note. I don't have an example
sorry.
that
Okay,
springs to mind at this.
Should we get yes? Yeah. Wait. So I think so every political party has accepted that definition except for the Conservative. Every political party has accepted the definition except for the Conservative Party. So it's just one. That's the question he's asking. Why did the party reject it?
You want the honest answer? I'm not sure, but that's something I can take up and find out why that was rejected. What
Okay.
terminology? Because obviously, when
Press the button. Yeah.
Okay, when a particular term of race and equality comes up, there are criterion that has to be met, and those criterion are set by the Commission of Racial Equality. So I'm not sure what criteria that was met. I will look into that.
Okay. Yeah.
I have a specific question for Dr. Ali. So you talk about divisiveness and specific against that. So this is a specific question about a specific person, which is Katie Hopkins, who, for people who don't know, she's quite a divisive figure in the public life. She wrote a blog post or an article in The Sun where she called migrants cockroaches, right? And I teach sociology at the university, and I compare how using rhetoric of cockroaches, we remember this from neo-Nazi rhetoric about Jewish people. However, you posted a picture together with Katie Hopkins on Twitter after this, and you called her an intelligent woman. So I just want to ask you, how do you justify that? What is
That's a very valuable question, sister. When I met Katie Hopkins, that was the first time I knew nothing about her. That's the honest truth. And she was charming to me. When I found out later that evening, a friend of mine said, "Do you know who she is?" I looked her up, I blocked her. However, I thought I had deleted that tweet. I hadn't, and that's the truth. That's the honest answer. When you say cockroach, when she refers to Asians, I am an Asian. When she refers to a Muslim, I am a Muslim. Am I going to endorse somebody with such nasty, horrible views? That was a genuine mistake when I didn't know, and I'm telling you the God's truth. I'm sitting here. I'm not lying to you.
Thank you. We'll get three questions together.
Gareth Thomas has run many careers there. If you lived in Harrow, you know that. Number two, which is my question, any reason why Sajid Javid, a Muslim, or questionable, he's flitted between being a Muslim and not, wasn't invited to the state dinner with, I don't know if it was Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's my question.
Let's get a couple of questions in and then we'll come back. Yeah. So there's someone at the back who raised a question there. Yep, sorry. No, I think you've already asked a question. You've already asked a question. Anyone else? I think there was someone back there who hadn't asked. Yep, sorry, that person there. People who haven't asked questions first. Sorry, yep. Yeah. We'll come to foreign policy in a minute, okay? That's okay. Anything else on Islamophobia? Yes? No, sorry. Anyone who hasn't asked a question?
One little clarification which I would like to know.
Quickly, yeah.
Yeah. While talking on the subject of Islamophobia, I believe Sayyida Warsi was removed from the cabinet. She had made comments on Islamophobia.
Okay. Dr. Ali.
Sorry, I'm not sure what do you need clarity?
I believe Sayyida Warsi was removed from the cabinet.
She resigned due to after Gaza. She resigned after. She resigned. No, it was nothing. But she resigned herself because she didn't agree with the policy on Gaza. She resigned due to a policy on. I don't think that's. She didn't. So if you could answer the question that was earlier about Sajid Javid not being invited to the state dinner despite being Home Secretary at the time, and given the fact that normally Home Secretaries are invited to state dinners, is your point that that's an example of a problem of how Muslim or people of Muslim background are treated? Okay.
Well, brother, I don't know why Sajid was left off the list from invitation. I don't hold. I'm not sure who does that list, but I know that a very prominent Muslim called Mr. Barry from London Muslim Center was invited. So I don't think we can draw inferences from that that he was not invited to a state dinner because he's Muslim. I think you'd have to ask him that question if he felt that it was Islamophobic. That only he can answer that question. But I haven't heard anything to suggest the case.
Why the Home Secretary wasn't invited to the state dinner? Wouldn't you want? I mean, I would.
Well, he may have had personal reasons, brother. I don't think we can.
He publicly said that he wasn't invited. That was different. He said that he wasn't invited.
Yeah, well,
himself.
Okay, well, I think we'd have to ask him why, if that's what he felt, why did he's in a position to ask that question, did he hold him to account?
Let's ask that person in the back and then we'll come to foreign policy. Last.
Gareth? What we've made clear is that we accept the definition of Islamophobia that was drawn up by a range of Muslim scholars under the auspices of the Muslim Council for Britain and the All-Party Group on Muslims in the British Parliament. We accept that as a party, and we've accepted that here in Harrow under the leadership of the Labour Council as well. At a national level, what the party is also saying is that we need to implement the recommendations of the Leveson inquiry, require our media to accept the authority of the regulator, of the media regulator, so that when there are examples of Islamophobic writing in newspapers, then the regulator can hold those media barons to account for that Islamophobic behaviour, and in that way, hopefully, gradually improve the discourse that we're seeing across our country, which is undoubtedly being poisoned by what gets written in some of our media.
On the media.
The media has a regulator, which is Ofcom, and it's their duty to ensure that what is put out in the public does not discriminate against any religion or any ethnicity. And so where there has been a failure, Ofcom need to be held to account, and we as public servants must make sure that Ofcom is held to account. But also, as a lot of the questions have been about Islamophobia, I grew up in London, I work in London, and I'm a British Muslim as well, and I have a name that is Muslim, my surname is Ali. What my personal experience, and please don't shout at me, is that the single most destructive in our time that has given rise to hatred against Muslim was the Iraq war, an illegal war that was the Labour Party, Tony Blair, that started. And you should today ask yourself, when you ask me all those questions, have you questioned what your Member of Parliament did? He voted 5 times for the Iraq war, and 5 times he voted against an investigation of the Iraq war, an illegal war that killed millions of Muslims, and since then we have seen so much more destruction emanating from that in our times. So it's all very well sitting here and just preaching, but really, as the Harrow West Member of Parliament, that's what your Member of Parliament did. And I can categorically tell you, if I was that Member of Parliament, I couldn't have voted 5 times for an illegal war, which was not justified, and then Tony Blair pinged the blame on an innocent man called David Kelly, who said there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
we'll come to you in a second. Just wait. Yeah, and that's what I was literally just about to ask. Can we just ask? We're going to move on to foreign policy right now. So if this is a good segue, can you respond to Dr. Ali?
My record in terms of how I voted on Iraq and a whole series of other foreign policy crises is well known. There is no question, looking back at the decision that was made on Iraq, that it was made under a false premise.
So would you have voted for it today if it was?
If I knew now what I know then I don't think I or many others would have been able to vote for it. Absolutely not. No. So a mistake was made, and I have to acknowledge that. And I think in the end, Gordon Brown was right to bring in the Chilcot inquiry. And we've made clear as a party in our current manifesto that we would accept all the recommendations of that Chilcot inquiry.
Okay, let's move on to foreign policy. This is our last area that we're going to discuss with everybody. In 15 minutes, and we'll just cover off. We'll focus on foreign policy. Both parties have put out manifestos. The Labour Party manifesto includes the restriction of arms sales or stopping of arms sales to Saudi Arabia and to Israel. Is that a policy that you're a supporter of?
Yes, it's a policy. I'm standing under the banner of the Labour manifesto. So it is right to say we would stop arms sales to certainly to Saudi Arabia and certainly to Israel, where there's clear evidence of them being used against civilians. And we've seen many examples of that evidence being brought forward. We'd also go further and say we want to see an overhaul of the arms export control regulations, which appear to have allowed that to happen in the first place.
And would you be a supporter of the stopping of arms sales to Saudi Arabia and Israel?
What I would be a supporter of is looking at how the entire entire foreign policy, where arms are being sold and what regimes are being sold to.
Okay. So would you be a supporter of specifically of arms sales to Saudi Arabia and Israel? I think the reason that question keeps on being raised is because of the fact that the government has sold more arms to Saudi Arabia than any government in the past, and it's gone up significantly. And there are a lot of Muslims, obviously, who've been killed in Yemen, and there are lots of challenges there. So that's the question that I want to ask: are you for or against the banning of arms sales to Saudi Arabia and Israel?
I'm going to be honest with you, brother Migdad. I haven't read the entire minutiae of the policy, so I don't want to say something here and then be accused of lying. I think it's important that I go, have a look at the entire foreign policy. And when you say that the Conservative Party, no, it was actually the Labour Party who, if I remember, a certain gentleman called Robin Cook said that he's going to have an ethical foreign policy. Well, there was no ethical foreign policy when the arms were sold to Iraq and lots of other shady regimes across the world who are continuing to use those arms to kill not just Muslims. All people matter to us, because what Islam teaches us is to respect humanity and love everybody, whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. So I will say to you honestly that I have to look at the minutiae before I make a public promise to you and agree to what you're saying.
Okay, and we're just going to ask two more questions.
You wouldn't even support banning arms sales to Saudi Arabia, given what's happened in Yemen?
Okay.
And you voted 5 times for Iraq war, and then you voted 5 times for an investigation into it. What I'm saying to you is I want to look at the manifesto fully and then come back with an answer that is, with the knowledge. Without, I'm sitting here and I haven't read the entire minutiae of it, and you're agreeing to me, to answer that question.
You're going to be a representative. You want to be a representative of Harrow West.
You've already been a representative, and look what you did.
I have already been a representative, and I'm being held to account many times, but you're not even willing to say where you stand on a personal level?
On a personal level, as a GP, I believe in the sanctity of human life. Okay, but I also believe there are times when you have to have war, and that is allowed in Islam as well to save your country. But you're asking me on a minute bit of policy that I haven't actually read.
It isn't a minute bit of policy.
Okay.
It's a major foreign policy issue at the moment.
Okay, so
Every day. It's not a minutiae thing. I said this audience where you sit with that. There are thousands of people being killed every day, whether that's in
Palestine or Yemen or the Middle East. And Iraq.
Okay.
Stands
Okay.
with Israel.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay. Okay. So on Israel and Palestine, are you part of or supporter of the Conservative Friends of Israel and similarly, Labour Friends of Israel and Labour Friends of Palestine? Are you on either? Do you support or are you part of either of those groupings in the party?
So I belong to both Labour Friends of Palestine and Labour Friends of Israel, and attend occasionally their meetings. I'm not on the executive committee of either, partly because I was a shadow minister for the Middle East under Ed Miliband, and before that was a minister in the last Labour government. So took no active part in either organisation, but as a shadow minister spoke to both groups.
And do you support the usage of international law in any situation? And are you a strong supporter of international law wherever it takes place, wherever breaches of international law occur?
I am a strong supporter of international law. What I would say is that what we know is that the United Nations, its writ does not run across the global order, and we need to do more to reform the United Nations, to gain support for the International Criminal Court. There is a much bigger piece of international work that is necessary. One of the things that I think the last Labour government under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown do deserve credit for is the investment they put into the United Nations to make it more effective, and the fact that the International Criminal Court does have impact. We have seen some of the people who were responsible for some of the genocides in the Balkans conflicts being brought to justice as a result of that International Criminal Court. That one very powerful example of international law that is working where countries have signed up to its protocols.
And yes or no, are you a supporter of the state of Palestine? An independent state of Palestine?
Absolutely. I think there has to be a two-state solution in the Middle East. That's the way you get security and prosperity for both the people of Israel and the people of Palestine.
So same questions to you. Are you a supporter, or are you probably not part of? Are you a supporter of the Conservative Friends of Israel and all the Conservative Friends of Palestine?
I support a dual state, both Israel and Palestine, and in this I agree with Gareth that there can only be a solution where there is a recognition of dual state, so the bloodshed can be stopped and both the people of Palestine and Israel can live. So when you show that, brother, actually I do support. I volunteer for Muslim charity, and my own family and friends have raised money for Palestine. So when you just show part of a story, that's misleading.
So what's that story?
Okay,
What is it?
because you're showing me with the Conservative Friends of Israel, what I've always supported is a dual state solution. There has to be an Israel and there has to be a Palestine. There has to be Palestine, there has to be an Israel. So I don't just support the one, I support a dual state.
Okay, let's get some questions that we haven't had covered all the topics right now. We'll start with new people who haven't asked first, and then we'll come back and loop back. Yes, gentleman in the middle.
Sorry, Anwara, just a quick comment, very quick comment. In that, I thank you for admitting you made a mistake with Katie Hopkins. I hope when you actually read the Conservative Manifesto, you realise you made a mistake with joining the Conservative Party and block that in your life as well. But my question is actually to Gareth. Gareth, I've probably spoken to 99% of the people here trying to persuade them to vote for Labour with varying degrees of success. One of the throwbacks I often get is, one, you voted for the Iraq War, which you mentioned. You were part of the Labour Friends of Israel, generally supporting Israel. You attended a rally after Modi's recent election, celebrating his victory, and you also tried to block a Kashmir demonstration recently as well. How would you respond to those accusations? How would I respond to people?
Okay. So on Iraq, I've been very clear, and my public record on Iraq is very clear, and I've been clear in the answer I've given this evening. On the Kashmir demonstration, I made clear that there have been two demonstrations on Kashmir. I've made clear that there is should be a right of protest that we respect across the UK. And that people have a right to protest. I think there was, as both Sadiq Khan and I believe Cressida Dick would accept, a failure of some of the policing protocols in August, and a much better effort in terms of policing the second demonstration. I have to say, I wish the demonstration on the second demonstration hadn't taken place on Diwali, because it did cause problems and offence within the Hindu community. I say that respecting the right of those who feel very, very strongly about the human rights situation in Kashmir to demonstrate. But in the context of our country and the divisions we face here in Harrow and across the country, I took the position not to seek to block the demonstration as you describe, but to firstly make sure it was properly policed this time, which it certainly was better policed. But also, I have to say, I would have preferred if it had taken place on a different day, because we do have to reach out across, whilst respecting people's right to protest, by speaking out on big international issues. We also have to try and make sure that we're reaching out to other communities in our borough and trying to avoid some of the divisions that have scarred other parts of the UK and of the world. And if that means a little compromise in terms of when a demonstration takes place or how a demonstration takes place, I would suggest that is a price that we should contemplate paying.
Okay, briefly, what is your position on the international law being breached when it comes to Kashmir in particular? Many Muslim communities have been very upset with the way that this government has looked at Kashmir. What is your specific position when it comes to the human rights abuses that are taking place in Kashmir?
Well, I've been to Kashmir, been to both Muzaffarabad in the wake of the earthquake in Pakistan, in Kashmir, and I've also been to Srinagar and talked to a range of people there.
And your policy?
I'm answering the question, Mikdad. What I would say is you have to have international law accepted, but there's a broader point. You also have to have Indian law accepted, monitored, and enforced properly across both countries. And we, as a party, will always speak out on these big human rights questions. We can't directly intervene in India, in Kashmir, and get involved very directly. But what we can do is help to try and strengthen the relationship between Pakistan and India through work on the international stage, and that's something I think would be a good thing.
You said that you think that the right of the Indian government is very important on internal affairs. Do you think that the Chinese government has the right to do whatever it wants to the Uyghur Muslims in China? Or do you think that actually, when 1 million people are being in concentration camps, actually there needs to be some action from the international community? And why is it different there, if that is your policy or your position, to India? And then we'll come to you.
Well, on the issue of China, I'm not, if I'm honest with you, I've not seen what the British government have said on that situation. I haven't followed that as closely as a series of other international events. As I say, I think it is right and the responsible thing for Britain to always speak up on human rights. So where there are concentration camps being used, we should condemn them and intervene directly with government to encourage them to change tack.
And you don't think we should encourage the Indian government to change that?
Well, I think there is already an effort that is being made in that regard, and as I say, it's right that people make their voices clear on that question.
Dr. Ali, what's your view on what should be happening in Kashmir and what the government should be doing given the large human rights abuses in Kashmir?
I think it's the job of the international courts to hold those to committing atrocities in Kashmir and anywhere across the world. However, also, I think that if I become your member of parliament in Harrow West, I will not be interfering in the sovereign matters of other countries. I think that both Prime Minister Imran Khan and Prime Minister Modi are, two very talented people who have not come from dynastic families, but from the very grassroots. And I think that what has to happen, it has to be a regional solution, like we had the Good Friday deal in Northern Ireland to bring about peace, and that has to happen. What the international community has to do is to ensure that the international courts are doing, are standing by their rules and regulations and ensuring that any atrocities that are committed are brought to light and they are given the right, justification.
You mentioned Prime Minister Modi, and you said some very positive words about him. Many Muslim communities might find that quite difficult, given that he was seen to be the person who was responsible for the massacre of Muslims in Gujarat. Do you genuinely believe that Prime Minister Modi is someone who you think is a very positive person who should be encouraged and welcomed here? Yeah.
I said both Prime Minister Imran Khan and Prime Minister Modi, and you decided just to pick on Modi. What I'm saying is that I, as your, standing as your member of parliament, I cannot influence what the international courts have to look at what the evidence is, and based on that evidence, they must stand to the law, and whoever is committing an atrocity brought to attention.
Okay, let's get some questions. Final questions from the audience. Oh, you have to go. Okay. Okay. Final questions, and then we'll be wrapping up. Here you go. New people who haven't asked questions only at the moment. No one else has asked. No one else has asked more than one question. Please. No one else. We've got it recorded. It's fine. Doctor, yeah, please.
I'm a GP as well. Last 40 years. I don't live in this locality, so I can't vote for either of you.
That's fine.
But can I say that because of 2 to 3 major issues related to Islamophobia, foreign policy, NHS, I can never convince myself, my family, or anyone currently to vote for the Conservative Party. That's my first step. Having said so,
Do you have a question? Focus on.
having said so, now just one little preamble before my question.
Quickly, please.
Having said so, I admire your passion, and I think, Gareth, allow me to say this, I think a change in Harrow would have been good for you to come in and bring some local changes and bring your experiences here. But as I said, the overall win of the Labour is important. So my question is, once Jeremy Corbyn becomes the Prime Minister, will you consider resigning from the Conservative Party and joining the Labour Party?
Okay. Okay, we'll have some final closing statements from both sides. And Dr. Ali, that can be part of her answer if she chooses to answer.
So to the brother, thank you so much for your servitude. For 40 years you served in the National Health Service. I salute that servitude. And my answer is no. I will still be voting and working for the Conservative Party because, like all of you, I believe in family, I believe in my religion, I believe in patriotism. And if you give me the honor of becoming your MP, then I will work side by side with you, shoulder to shoulder with every community, and I will be a unity candidate, not a divisive candidate, and bring all our communities together. Our religion, Islam, teaches us to love, to be tolerant, to respect. And that is what I will be doing, working side by side, addressing the local issues and bringing my expertise, in both as a counsellor and as a doctor. Thank you so much. Jazakallahu khairan.
Thank you very much. And Gareth, your final closing statement?
Firstly, thanks very much to everybody for coming out on a Friday evening and for being interested in our discussions. Whatever else matters in terms of how you vote, what matters most is the quality of our democracy going forward, and the very direct participation that you're having in holding the two of us to account to make your judgment is hugely important. We have to do more to encourage our young people to get active in politics. And through that, I hope we'll see more members of this community and other members of the Muslim community in Harrow getting involved in politics and standing for election to the local council.
Thank you very much to both candidates. So if any of you would like to get involved in the the elections, general elections coming up, whether for the Conservative Party or for the Labour Party, please do get involved. Contact one of us and we can definitely hook you up with either party if you choose to join or get involved. Thank you to both Dr. Ali. Thank you very much to Gareth Thomas for coming and for speaking. And for taking your questions and answering all of the difficult questions that were asked. Thank you very much. Thank you.